I was born in 1960 in Kenya, Nairobi. Came to Bradford in February 1962 at the tender age of 1. I live in Thornton in Bradford, and my name is Kamlesh Patel. My official title is Professor Lord Patel of Bradford. Early memories of life, quite difficult really. The whole family was in Kenya, and then the Kenyatta government came to power, and there was an exodus of people really. If you want a Kenyan citizen, then you had difficulties. So the family had to suddenly move. So my mother, father, 2 brothers and 2 sisters, we travelled from Kenya. Most of our relatives, cousins, went to Leicester. However, my dad came to Bradford because his sister was living here. So tough times. We lived in a small 1-bedroom back-to-back, all of us, with, I suppose you could term it a kitchen. It was about 2 foot by 3 foot. Didn't have any bathrooms. The cellar was used as a bathroom. You had a little hole in the floor and poured buckets of water on yourself, and an outside toilet. So that was a tough life. My father was really well qualified. He was a maths teacher, he was a priest, and he was a master chef, but he couldn't get a job here, and his first and only job in this country was working on the buses, cleaning buses, and he did that until he passed away all his life. He got us out of poverty because of his ability to cook for weddings. So he'd work all day on the buses, go on a Friday night and cook for 500 people at an Asian wedding, get showered in the morning and be the priest. So he earned extra money. But I remember the cobbled streets. I think you could probably count the number of brown faces in Bradford on one hand. At that time there were about half a dozen families, and that was it. Interesting times. It was fun in the sense, you were out playing all the time. I was out all of the time. I didn't actually go to school till I was 6 or 7, because nobody knew I existed, because my mum and dad never registered me. So I played and learnt whatever I did on the streets actually. And then they realised I was here, and I was sent to immigrant school, because every Asian person was sent to immigrant school, so this bus used to come and pick us up and take us miles away somewhere to an immigration centre where they supposedly taught you English and other things. Bearing in mind, even though I spoke Gujarati at home with my mum, English actually was my first language, or Yorkshire was. That was so I didn't really learn to read and write until I was about 9. Sort of struggled with that because life was tough. My dad was working out all hours God sends. My mother was trying to look after all the children, and because we lived in such poor conditions, we had a lot of illness in the family. So my sister, bless her, at 12 years, she died of rheumatism, and my brother Krishna at 15, he had a heart problem, so he started having heart conditions and stuff. And I don't think the damp and the weather and everything helped. But I was little, so you sort of live in your own little world at that age. School, the early years, was not memorable in the sense, I wasn't very bright. I didn't learn to read and write till late. And it was sort of until secondary school I realised that, I had to work hard and do well. And that gave me a bit of confidence. I sort of won some prizes for history and RE, and that sort of gave me a bit of confidence and kept me going. Actually, school was okay because I was good at sport, and you make friends when you're good at sport, especially cricket. Grammar school was a baptism by fire. So the first day you went there, there were kids that were twice the size of you. Literally the first day we went there, we were beaten up, all the money taken off us, not a lot of it, but everything taken off us, and that was the baptism by fire, going away from this very close-knit, small area that we lived in and played in the back streets. But again, sport was a great healer. Being captain of the cricket school, stops you being bullied, which was, useful. Yeah, Bellevue Boys have changed beyond belief now. I mean, it was about 5% black and Asian when I went to it. Quite a good school. We were in the top 3-4 schools in Bradford with good results. I went back a few years ago to give a talk to the school, and physically it's still the same. It's 97% Asian now. So complete, it was nice to go back to the school and see people. But we had some great school teachers, and I think it was those school teachers that really give you a chance in life, that give you some hope and aspiration. I was probably a slight oddball. I mean, so you always had these groups. You had a group of black Caribbeans, and you had a group of Asians, and then the white lads and girls. I tended to mix with both. So I had a very good relationship with, sort of the white community that lived around me, because I'd lived there with them. It was very mixed at that time. It wasn't isolated or, so I think I had a reasonable relationship with both. And again, sport was a great bringer of people together for me. Probably about 8 or 9, carving a piece of wood into the shape of a bat, using either milk crates or school briefcases as wickets, and a tennis ball. And that was my whole cricketing world, probably for about 6 or 7 years, and then played on a proper grass wicket only sort of at school at about 11, 12. Otherwise, never been coached. It was always just, either you could play or you couldn't. It was as simple as that. And I think, if we take bowling, it's an odd thing for a human body to do, actually, to put your arms up in funny ways and jump up and down. And I think either you can do it or you can't. Luckily, I could. So we did it, but, didn't really learn any techniques or anything. It came quite naturally. But played all day and night, every day. Most of it was on back streets. The parks came later on. So we had a field near the house called Spencer Field, where a proper team played, and we used to play on the boundary edges and sort of watch these adults play. I was lucky enough, I sort of joined those adults when I was about 14, 15, and began to play sort of proper cricket with a hard ball, and it was an escapism from the harsh reality of life, actually, because, I suppose the early days don't hold many happy memories in terms of how hard it was for my parents and watching them work, and my sister dying and my brother getting poorly. The happy memories came from cricket. They just give you friendships, and if you're in the back street scoring 50 in our rules, you went home really happy because you'd done it. And I think that those memories will always stay, whether it was at school or wherever. And it was a backdrop to, trying to strive to be successful in whatever I did personally. Most of the sort of Asian families that came in the sort of 60s and 70s was around an area called Great Horton. And, so we all lived there. And then sort of gradually over the years, more and more communities came, and we spread out to other parts of Bradford. My mum wasn't too keen, but, it kept me occupied. But, it was really sad because my dad played for Bombay. So he was ambidextrous. So he used to ball right-handed, a right-arm spinner, and batted left-handed. And he was a great cricketer in his days. And then my eldest brother, Krishna, was exactly the same. He bowled right-handed and batted left-handed. And I'd seen my older brothers play in the parks, and that was a memory. But as life went on, they never saw me play. So I will never forget it to this day. I was chosen for a league side, and we were playing in a cup final at Pudsey St Lawrence. So, great event. And, most kids were picked up and taken by their dads in the cars. I caught 3 buses to get there with my tiny little rucksack. And I told my mum where I was going, and I don't know whether she believed me or not, but my dad came, and it was the only time he's ever seen me. And he walked into the ground and I was bowling, and literally as he walked in, I bowled somebody, and he watched that, and he watched it for 5 minutes and then went, you know, and that was a really touching moment. So, you know, I was very fortunate. We're a fantastic PE teacher, Richard Noble. I'm still in touch with him to this day after all these years. And he was a real sportsman. And he was the opening bowler for a team called Manningham Mills in the Bradford League. So very high class standard. Phil Sharp was a Yorkshire player, England player. He was the captain, and we had several overseas players. And at Bellevue, we played annually a staff versus pupil cricket match that the whole school watched. And we played this game, and I bowled quite a lot, and I captained the side. And he took me, and he said, I was 15, I think, and he said, come with me to Manningham Mills. I want you to come and play there. And it was a bit scary, but it was cricket. So I went anywhere to play cricket. And ended up playing there for a couple of years, and played with him in the first team when Don Wilson was playing, and he was sort of called up to MCC as a coach, and I got in the side. So that was fascinating. In addition to that, I played for anybody and everybody. I think I played on a Tuesday night for a club. I played for the General Post Office on a Wednesday night. I played junior cricket on a Thursday evening, and I played Saturday in the Bradford League. And then Sunday, I played for a whole variety of sort of clubs. And then when the Qaidi-Azam League was formed, I played every Sunday in the Qaidi-Azam League. So, you know, every moment I spared above my working life, I was playing cricket. I'd love to think I was an all-rounder, but actually I was a bowler. Because I'd never been properly coached. I inherently had the Asian spin wrists, everything went from off to leg. But I could bowl fairly well, and that's, you know, I bowled and bowled and bowled. I bowled 50 or 60 overs a week, I think. It's strange now, because if you're under 16 or 17 in the league, you're not allowed to bowl more than 7 or 9 overs. And then a 56-year-old man can bowl as much as he wants. You know, I remember when I was that young, I just wanted to bowl all the time. I had all the energy in the world. I suppose all young lads who play cricket. I got to the Yorkshire Senior Schools trials, and that was about as far as we got. Actually, if I'm honest, I don't think. I think there were about 6 nets, I remember, and loads of people watching. I don't think they actually looked at the 2 nets in the corner where me and lads from the local school were there. I was probably never that good to get further, but obviously anybody who wants to play cricket wants to play at the highest level. For me, it's just been enjoyment. It's kept me reasonably healthy in my hectic lifestyle, and it's created a great bond between me and my son playing together. And so that's what cricket has done for me, and I've developed so many friendships over the years and lots of skills from it, I think. Early days, I played for one of the first Asian teams that I ever set up. So even before that, I played for a team called Bradford Falcons. And these were 2 school teachers who'd set up a club. And we were told at school, if you want to play in a team, go and practice. A man called Tony Vanette, who was a school teacher, he set this thing up, and kids from all over the place turned up. And I got picked because of my fielding. And that were it. So I think the first 3 games we played in the Bradford Sunday Mutual League, we were a very good side. I just fielded. I didn't bat or ball because I didn't know I could. And then I think it was the 4th game or something, we were a bit in trouble. And they threw the ball to me and said, have a ball. And I got a hat-trick in the first over. And then I was the opening bowler then, henceforth, you know, which was nice. So it was a very first sort of proper league team. And then I ended up playing for one of the first Asian teams that were ever set up, called Bradford Indians, that played. And then Interlink was another team. And I played for Bradford Gymkhana, Graduates Association, Great Horton CC, Al Fala Cricket Club. I mean, you know, then I played friendlies with a team called Ramblers. Literally, I mean, people used to come at 10 o'clock in the morning and say, can you play today? And there wasn't a big issue about registration in those days, so I'd grab my bag and I'd go and play. And I played all over the place, for anybody and everybody. We're talking sort of 1975, 76, I was 15, 16, and then carried on playing right through till 1998. The team was called Al Fala, and we were an exceptionally talented team. Some great cricketers in there, and we won the league. I mean, we were an exceptionally talented league team. I remember, a group of the young lads played against the Yorkshire second 11s and beat them. So it was a coming together of people who felt safe. Yes, I mean, I wasn't good enough to play in that game because it was a very talented league with very talented players, but we all heard about it. The 11 best cricketers from the Qaidi-Azam League playing against a Yorkshire 11, second 11, and beat them. And I think for the Asian lads at the time, it was almost a vindication of saying, there's a load of talent here. We're just struggling to get through anywhere in any kind of decent standard of cricket because we just haven't got the pedigree, the soft skills, the background, the access. And I think that was, it was quite a momentous thing to have done. I suppose people over the years forgot about it, but I think hats off to the people who sort of put the money into setting this league up. There's lots of questions. Should you have an Asian league, and should you have, should everybody mix? But in those days, it was a struggle if you were the only one. If you didn't eat meat, if you didn't drink, if you weren't part of the culture, you didn't dress, with the right gear, you were not from a great... It was a struggle managing. Even if you enjoyed cricket, it was a struggle to be part of a club and a culture that developed over decades. And this was comfortable, and you still got a good standard of cricket. Maybe a bit more T20ish than the standard 50 overs. Some of the young lads that I played with, the inherent talent, and you just thought, and they did. I think 2 or 3 of the young lads went to play in the Bradford League, but most didn't survive. And it wasn't about not being good enough. It was just about fitting in. They just didn't feel comfortable. Some survived and stayed for a while, but a lot came back to play back in the Sunday Mutual League or back in the Qaidi-Azam League because that's where you felt comfortable. And really, most of us, I suppose, had enough sense to know we were never going to make a career of it, but it was fun. And we wanted fun. We wanted to play, ball and bat and field and do everything. I suppose it was second nature because in a sense most of my early cricket playing was with other Asians. I was a slight oddball in the sense that I don't think many Indians played in the Qaidi-Azam League, very few. So I was the odd Indian that played in everybody's team, whatever I could. And obviously the Qaidi-Azam League was mainly Pakistani. And most of the teams I played for were as well, besides Indian CC and Interlink. That was a combination of both. I was Kamlesh who could ball, chuck me the ball, get on with it. And, made great friends and, still see them to this day, walking around, and everybody's aged a bit. But, it was interesting. Just last year, Yorkshire County Cricket Club have done this over 55s. And I managed to play an over 55 and all my old friends came back, and you were playing with them, and they were a little bit older and a bit plump around the waist, but we had a great time. There's one memory, but it's not a pleasant one. We went to play. We used to play all over the place, and I remember bowling, and I was an opening bowler to this guy who hit me out of the ground so far that it landed on a Saab convertible driving down the road. So that's a memory I remember, but it's not a very pleasant one. I think my most memorable game was actually back in the Sunday Mutual League. I was playing for Graduates Association. We were top of the league. We were a very strong bowling side. We were quite a strong batting side, and we played against Great Horton Church that were a reasonable size, and I got 10 wickets. Got 10 wickets in 9 overs for 7 runs, and I knew that was time to go. On a high, that was the best time ever. I mean, I always worked, so because life was a bit tough. So probably from the age of about 15 or 16, I was either doing newspaper rounds or sweeping floors in curry houses. And then I ended up working actually in what's now called the Bradford Hotel, was a Stackis Hotel. It was called the Norfolk Gardens. And I ended up in a restaurant there. And while I was doing my A-levels, I was a silver service waiter in the room at the top restaurant. And when I finished my A-levels, I mean, my aim was to go to Carnegie to be a PE teacher. I'd managed to get, ironically, I'd got English literature, not being able to read and write, but I ended up with a quite a decent grade at A-level English literature. So I got a few A-levels, but life was too hard to the thought of actually not working and going to university, so I couldn't actually go. So my very first full-time job was a full-time silver service waiter at the Stackis Hotel. And then I became a barman. I turned 18, became head barman. And as you can tell, I talk a lot. And I remember one Sunday afternoon serving people, talking to everybody behind the bar. And this man said, "Would you like a proper job?" And I said, "Yes." So he says, "Turn up 9 o'clock tomorrow morning and I'll give you a proper job." So I did. He said, "Put a shirt and tie on." Put my shirt and tie on. And it was selling life insurance. That was fascinating because, they sent me on a training course and it was really tough, but it didn't half teach me things. And I remember, and this is way back in 1979, 78, 79, I went on a training course. And I remember this inspirational guy giving us a talk, and I remember it to this day. He said, if you want to succeed in life, he said, shoot and reach for the stars. And if you don't manage to fly with the stars, at least you'll walk on the moon. And that's a hell of a lot better than crawling on the earth. And I never forgot that. And I learned, very hard selling skills. I did that for a while, and then I had a whole series of jobs. I worked at the Co-op. I was a training manager. While I was a training manager there, I did a part-time diploma in management. I worked in an employment agency, and I learnt how to do accounts. I did the accounts of the company, bookkeeping, pay as you earn. I was the youngest betting office manager, turf accountant, for Ladbrokes. And I managed the city centre branch. I saw a lot of life in Ladbrokes because people had all sorts of addictions. I learnt a lot there. I worked in the career service, lots and lots of part-time jobs. In those days, you could leave one job and get another one. And then I finally found a job that I loved. I became an ambulance man. I think it was the first Asian ever to be an ambulance man in West Yorkshire. Loved the job. You're young, you've got a big 3.5 ton ambulance you can tear down the road in. And, it was very hard work. Literally I was working 70, 80 hours a week for 70, 80 pounds a week. So was looking for better, things. I worked as a special constable for 10 years with West Yorkshire Police. Actually joined the police for a very short time as well. Tough times those days, very tough times. You had to be one of them or one of us, and I always crossed the two divides, I think. And then eventually I found the job in life that I wanted to do. I became a social worker. Bradford was ahead of the game in those days. It actually recruited unqualified people who it thought had the skills and the potential to become qualified social workers. And I got one of these valued jobs. I mean, hundreds of people applied for them. And I worked, you were supposed to have 75% of your caseload working with Asian communities. Actually, about 90% of my caseload was working with white communities. I worked in Keighley. and there wasn't a big Asian population there. I learned to be a good social worker, and then I went to university at the ripe old age of 27. Got qualified, became a qualified social worker, did 2 placements, one in probation, ended up doing a documentary for BBC on social work training while I was there with Jonathan Nimbleby. And then I did something very unusual. I found a placement working with a tiny little drug agency, working with drug users. It was the sort of mid-late 80s. And I wrote a dissertation on what I thought was the experience of Asian people with drugs in the 80s. That got published in the British Journal of Social Work. And that sparked, I suppose, it was the first time anybody had done any research around Asian drug users. I came back to Bradford Social Services, worked in alcohol and drug team, and then about a year later, I was approached by the probation service saying, would you like to work for us full time? Great career ahead. And I was also approached by the drugs agency who said, would you like to come back and be the manager? And I'd been a student there. The probation offered me a lifetime job. The drugs agency said the only problem is we only have 3 months funding left. So that's all we can offer you, but you can be the manager. I had my first child was just born. He was only a baby, so I did the right thing. I went to work for the drugs agency. I took the 3 month job, and I stayed there for 7-8 years. We set up one of the first mother and baby drug rehabs in the country. We set up some of the first needle exchange schemes in the country. I did the first research of its kind with Professor Geoffrey Pearson, who was a big expert on drugs at the time. We wrote a couple of reports on Asian heroin users, quite groundbreaking research, and I quadrupled the size of the organisation. But all the skills I'd learnt about accounts, payroll, leadership, from all the other jobs, all rolled into one to run a voluntary organisation, a charity. And I ran it as a business. And I think inherent business acumen helped me set up, an organisation for working with people who have really suffered in life. If it was a business, then I would have found a niche business and I would have been a multimillionaire. I didn't like inequality. I saw enough of it in my whole life. And every time I saw people, it happened in my own family with my brother getting ill and stuff, and there was nobody to help. So when I saw inequality, I wanted to fill the gap. So that's why I set up the first mother and baby drug rehab. That's why I set up the first, research on Asian drug users. So that's why I set up one of the first daycare facilities for Asian women with mental health problems. I saw a gap, nobody believed it. My anecdotal experience and my gut feeling said, I think this needs doing. And I was full of energy and I set these things up. But that put me on the national stage from Bradford. I was speaking in the drugs field, I was speaking at every conference that was going on in the country. The British Crime Survey said the least likeliest group of people to use drugs were Asians. I knew otherwise, and I knew that families were saying, oh, our son's poorly, so we've sent him to warmer climates in Pakistan and he'll get better. I also knew that he was paying £100 a gram for a gram of heroin here, and when he went back to Pakistan, he was buying that pure heroin for 50p a gram. Now, because government denied it, because policymakers denied it, because research couldn't tap into this, and because our own communities stuck their heads in the sand, we allowed a lot of people to suffer, and we allowed a criminal market to grow. And, I've worked in Tower Hamlet, I've worked in every inner city area in this country with drug users, people with mental health problems, and I've learnt from communities. And that, helped me in a sense in my latter life as an academic, because I eventually left Bradford and moved from the drug centre. I'd got a bit of a national reputation. I'd published a lot, and I started teaching at university. I used to teach social work and I used to teach health and inequalities. very soon got bored of it because I was used to running 3 or 4 things. So I set up a tiny research centre, me and a research assistant. And it took about 8 years. We became probably one of the largest research centres in the country. I had 125 people working for me, 23 professors. We did research on drugs, on alcohol use, on mental health, on extremism, on domestic violence. But we made a difference to people's lives. I wouldn't do any research if it did impact on an individual or community.
Where was this?
This was the University of Central Lancashire. I set up the Centre for Ethnicity and Health that later grew into the International School of Communities, Rights and Inclusion. But while I was doing that, I had several other jobs. So I wrote a 5-year strategy for the Labour government on race equality and mental health. I was an architect of several policies on drugs. I chaired 3 or 4 national organisations and learnt over the years, learnt off other people. Lots of good people to mentor me. I learnt how to chair and run organisations and, never looked back really. And then sort of out of the blue, 10 years ago now, I got made an independent peer in the House of Lords. So I took all that grassroots learning, all the policy work, and finally I was able to influence legislation and join up the dots. And it's an enormous privilege to be able to do that. And I've never forgotten the work with the communities, because that's what makes legislation proper. At least I can say that works in practice or that doesn't work in practice, and that's what I see my job as. The hardest thing I ever did in my life was become a professor. That was really tough. You had to be, judged by your peers. Other senior academics who sort of said you were good enough. I got nominated to apply to be a crossbench peer and resisted it for a couple of years because I just thought nobody's going to want, me in the House of Lords don't, I eventually applied. I got shortlisted suddenly. I got interviewed. There was a huge amount of checks. And then suddenly you got a glimmer that actually this might actually happen, and it was scary and exciting all at the same time. I'd sort of come from the back streets of Bradford, and an immigrant child who didn't speak, didn't write English that well, to now being part of the legislature of the country, to actually be able to make big decisions and help things develop. It's an enormous privilege. The last 10 years being part of the House of Lords, I've obviously carried on my day jobs as an academic in London, and I still support loads of charities. I'm patron of about 36 charities, and I still do a lot of committee work, and I've chaired lots of things. But just being and mixing with people who have phenomenal expertise and talent on an everyday basis, it's a new day, and it's an immense sort of privilege, really, an honour to be there. I got back into cricket actually before this incredible appointment to the ECB. I got back into cricket after the Ashes 2005 tour. I'd stopped playing for years. I'd, put it out of my mind. And my son, who hated cricket but was a very good sportsman, turned 16 and a half and said, I want to play cricket. So I said, it's a bit late. I said, no, watch the Ashes and all my friends are playing, I want to play. So I thought, okay. I used to coach, so I took him to the winter nets and sort of coached him properly, and he obviously had an inherent talent. So, I thought, you need to go play for a club. So ironically, there was a local club called Wibsey Park Avenue that played at Park Avenue, Wibsey Chapel Cricket Club. And so I took him to the practices at the evening, and he said, come and practice with me. I'm a bit nervous. And we both got picked. So we played at Park Avenue for 3 years for Wibsey Park Chapel. And he just got better and better and better. And then we went to the Central Yorkshire League at North Oudham Fields, and we played together there for a few years until he overtook his dad and went first team. But, the 5 or 6 years I played with him, alongside him, watched him get his first 50, his first 5 wickets, his first 100, was the best experience of any father's life. Wonderful. And, it was a great opportunity to do that. And then, as you say, suddenly, last year, I got approached by various individuals and the ECB to put my hat in the ring to become an independent director on the board. Completely out of the blue. I'd obviously always talked about cricket and, fairly clear. They were not there picking me for my cricket knowledge, because it's only average. They were hopefully picking me for my ability to be on a board, and for governance, and for being able to think strategically and join up the dots between sport, health, cohesion and other opportunities, and obviously a small P analytical P network that's quite extensive. Just an incredible, it's come full circle from playing on the back streets of Bradford to sitting on the English and Wales Cricket Board, helping make decisions about the future for all young people, to play, to watch, to be inspired, and hopefully to become part of England's first 11. I think the leadership of the ECB at the moment is really inspirational. I think the chief exec and the chairman are keen to change. This is an organisation, like most organisations, that's evolved over decades in particular ways, in particular, institutional field. It's looking beyond that. It's looking at every person getting a bat and ball in their hand. People being inspired to want to play, people being inspired to come and watch and get engaged in the game. It also recognises that, 35% of all grassroots cricket in this country is played by South Asian young players. That's a third of the ECB's future cricketers. It recognises that despite 35% being at grassroots level, we've only got a few percent, the Moeen Alis and the Adil Rasheeds, playing in our test matches. So the access is great at a particular level, but the access is not great through the system. The experiences are clearly different in terms of where club cricket and first class cricket and minor counties cricket, and the outcomes are clearly different. And I think we're strategically looking. It's not about equality, it's not about moral and ethics. Of course, that helps and that's part of it. It's a pure business sense. So I'll go back to my days of business acumen. If you don't get this right, if we don't meet somewhere in the middle, for the last 30 years we've sort of just kept missing each other, we will lose enormous talent. And this is our one opportunity to really engage with the game. And counties like Yorkshire, under its new leadership, have done phenomenally well. Projects like the Parks of Pavilion, just echo what's already out there. And it's been a pleasant surprise. I've gone around the country to Essex and Sussex, and I've seen Sri Lankans, Indians, Pakistanis, you name it, coming together, playing cricket. We just need to capture that and bottle it, and strategically help it move forward. Yeah, the first thing over the years, I've learned to become quite strategic and look at big outcomes and big opportunities. I think tinkering at the edges doesn't work. If something's not broken, don't fix it. If it's broken, then don't tinker with it. Radically get it changed and alter it. And I think we need a very strategic approach to tackling this issue. I think the ECB's done great, but it's a little bit scattergun. We've got Asian coaches, we've got Asian players, and we've won Asian awards. And ultimately, the success would be we wouldn't talk about Asian cricket. We'd talk about cricket. And it just happens that a third of the players across the system, from grassroots to county and to test, happen to be Asian, because they live in England, and Wales is a great another great, fantastic, bed of great cricketers from the South Asian community. But we do need to underpin it with real evidence. So, as you said, I think we almost need a heat map of England and Wales. Who is South Asian? Who do we define? Where do they live? What's the age projections? What will the place look like in 10 years, in 20 years? How many clubs are engaged? How many minor counties are engaged? How many counties are engaged? And what's the strategy? The ECB's job is to provide a framework for others to, engage in and develop and learn from their own. And I think people are up for it at the moment. I think it's not the talent, because I think if you go to a lot of the Sunday leagues or the Qaeda League, you will find lots of talent. I think one of the big barriers is the quality of grounds and the facilities and the governance structures and the umpiring and the grounds people and the operations of working together. I've always been sort of, I suppose, wanting to integrate things. There's a little bit of me at the moment that says if 1,000 people are playing in an Asian league and they're playing, let them play. If they're enjoying it, just make sure the doors are open for everywhere else. Because, if people want to play tape ball cricket in Morrison's car park, let them play it. Because our job is to get a bat and ball in everybody's hand. It's going to help them with their health. It's going to help them with, getting together with others. It's going to give them a competitive edge. Let them play. But just make sure all the other access routes are on a level playing field, pardon the pun, where that's there. So I think there's a evolving and changing my own head, and I think the answers lie with the people out there, as I've always done with my research. So drug users have told me what to do. It's the prisoners who've told me how to change prison systems. It's people with mental health problems have told me how best to deliver services. And I think, the cricketers will tell us what will make it change. And our job is to listen and put that in a strategic framework and make sure the funding's there and help that develop. A lot of these grounds were really well kept, but they were council owned in the days when the council had money, and the groundsman used to come and do it and used to play on a decent track. Over the years, the decline in funding for cricket grounds for other sports has just dropped, and I think the facilities have become very poor. Lots of the established clubs have bought the land, and they've got the structures in place. They raise money to do that. That's not quite happened with all the Asian clubs, and that's a big issue. And I think if we're looking Bradford alone, we know we need at least 18 extra grounds to cope with the capacity. That's now, and the ECB has developed grounds, and it's developing a fantastic community facility at Park Avenue, which will be, I think, one of the most iconic first-class community facilities, around in the country. And that's what we need more of. And we need to invest in these areas and develop, quality pitches so people can improve the standards. I'm probably thinking 10 years. I think I'd like to be able, I would hope in 10 years' time to not talk about South Asian cricket, but just to talk about cricket. And we would have, one of the best teams in the world, and they'll be made up of all the diverse populations of this country. That'll be success. And I think that's what I'll push to do, or play my little part in it.